Imagine this situation. The ongoing hospital EHR system project gets completed successfully. 3 years pass and you have moved on to bigger responsibilities. Your hospital one day gets audited by the government. Auditors ask you the question, why did you choose the costlier vendor in the market? There were several other bidders to your RFP. Now, how will you answer this question? I will answer this question at the end of the lesson. Let's move on. In this chapter, we discuss the artifact called assumption log. The assumption log is an artifact first created as an output of the develop project charter process, and then it is referred to throughout the project. First, let us understand what is an assumption. An assumption is any factor in the planning process that is considered to be true or real or certain without proof or demonstration. Assumptions often captures implicit requirements, thereby preventing expensive errors or rework in the future. You don't know assumptions to be true, but you assume the factor to be true so that you can proceed with your work. This happens every time, everywhere. Without making some educated guesses, you often cannot proceed further while starting a project. And the next question is, what is an assumption log? It is a log of all your assumptions and, more importantly, your progress in confirming or testing those assumptions, whether it is really true or false. The life of an assumption log starts at the very beginning of the project, right alongside the project charter as we just saw, and it is alive throughout the project. Every assumption, however, carries a risk because it can turn out to be false. And that is why assumption log is closely related to the risk register, which we will study later. Now, let us look at a real-life, well-constructed assumption log for our ongoing EHR hospital project. Attached with this lesson, you will find an Excel file. Please download and refer to it. It is important to keep the log as simple as possible, so we are recording only the most meaningful narratives. Let us look at the fields that are there in this file. First, we have a unique ID for each assumption. Okay, this is the ID. Then we have a category to classify every assumption, whether it is strategic, operational, financial, scheduling, functionality, all of this will come later. NFRs, which is non-functional requirements, technical, vendor-related, and anything else that you want. Then there is a date when this assumption was first logged. Then we have a description of the assumption, which basically explains what this assumption is all about. Then we have a confidence level. This is a high confidence that this assumption is true, low confidence that this assumption is true, and so on. And then we have the owner who is responsible to verify that the assumption is valid. The rationale or the logic why the assumption has been made. The impact, what happens at the assumption that we made turns out to be false. Okay, so we have the impact column here. And finally, the most important, we have this current status of the assumption, whether it is open, closed, and some logic behind it. For even more complex projects, you might record even more data like different action plans, dates, and so on. So now we can understand why it is important to log our assumptions. The first reason, of course, is that without making some educated guesses, we just cannot begin even simple projects. Assumption logs are critical for good governance and transparency. Second reason is when there is a change of personnel in the project. For example, the project manager is replaced or retired or changes projects, or if an expert consultant is run over by a bus or any such situations, the assumption log is invaluable. And that is why the project manager has to insist that all assumptions are logged with them. Now, let us return back to the first question from the beginning of the lesson. Auditors are asking you, why did we choose the costlier vendor? To answer this question, you have to show the auditors your assumption log. On line number 19, our assumption log calls for a complete regulatory compliance, which includes financial, accounting, reporting, and so on. All the other vendors did not have a full regulatory compliance. Their solutions were not mature enough for us. The only vendor with full compliance was expensive, and we had to choose them. If we had to choose otherwise, today your company would have to pay a hefty fine and maybe shut down and so on. So that is the answer that we provide. The assumption log has now become our superhero because we can justify our selection. And with that, I will end this lesson. In the next lesson, we will start a brand new ECO task called Engage Stakeholders. And it is going to be a lot of fun. So see you there.